Hey everyone, this is day 2 of Quadratic Formula. I'm picking up right where we left off yesterday. We did the first 3 problems yesterday. We're going to do these next 3 today. These problems are, I don't want to call them special cases, but they have some things show up that are different than A, B, and C. Some of your, on your assignment, some of the problems today are going to look like problems D, E, F, but not all of them. So the things that you did yesterday with A, B, and C are still going to show up. So if you haven't looked at the first lesson yet, if you didn't do yesterday's assignment, please look at it first. It's going to have things make a little bit more sense. In order to zoom in on this assignment, I can't show you the full page. So the quadratic formula, I can see it right now. You probably can't. If you want to write it down on the side, or if you want to load up the blank PDF of today's notes, you can. The quadratic formula always looks the same no matter how you pull it up, so you don't have to worry about if we changed it in any way. I'm going to jump right in though. This first problem, this is in our standard form where it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. The only thing is if you notice, there's no b here. When we use the quadratic formula for this, we know that a is equal to 4, b is equal to 0 because it doesn't exist, and c is equal to negative 144. When I go through and plug most of this in, I'm going to start by plugging in b, or the opposite of b, and b is just 0, plus or minus the square root of 0 minus 4. This is from the quadratic formula. Then I plug in a times c, so times 4 times negative 144. All over 2 times a, which is 4. From here, when I start solving this, I'm still going to have 0 plus or minus the square root of. This is going to be 0 minus 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times negative 144 is negative 2,304. If you notice, I have a double negative happening here, and sorry, this is going to be over 8. I have a double negative happening here, so I would add the opposite and just think about it as a positive 2,304 in my square root. The nice thing about this problem, and this didn't come up yesterday, is with this 0 up front and this plus or minus, 2,304 is a perfect square. So this just changes to be 0 plus or minus 48 all over 8. I can ignore this 0 because it doesn't mean anything. I can just think about this as positive 48 divided by 8 and negative 48 divided by 8. I'm going to get the same number, but I'm going to get different signs. One of these will be positive 6. One of these will be negative 6. If you think about the first couple days we worked with factoring these, a lot of our answers were the same number, one positive, one negative. This is what the quadratic formula looks like when you have that positive and negative answer. B doesn't always have to be 0 in order for this to work out. There's a couple different scenarios where that will work out. On the next problem, this is in the correct format. So A is equal to 1, B is equal to negative 8, and C is equal to positive 16. When I set this up, opposite of B would be positive 8, plus or minus the square root of 8 times, negative 8 times negative 8 would be 64, minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. When I go through and solve this, I get 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 64, all over 2. Now, 64, even though it is a perfect square, that's going to cancel out and be 0. 64 minus 64 is 0. So if this completely disappears, because the square root of 0 is just 0, it doesn't mean anything. I'm not plussing or minusing anything here. I could write this as 8 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. But this means nothing, and there's no difference between adding 0 or subtracting 0. This just becomes 8 over 2. So in this problem, I only get one answer, and that's positive 4. This would probably be a parabola where it is it's opening up or down, And what we just did is we found the vertex, because if it's only crossing in one point, that means this is probably the highest or lowest point where the parabola starts. So I only get one answer. This final one, I'm going to start with A is equal to 1, B is equal to 2, and C is equal to 8. When I go through and I plug this in, opposite of 2 is negative 2, plus or minus the square root of 2 times 2 is 4, minus 4 times A, which is 1, and then times C, which is 8, all over 2 times 1. When I go through and solve this, I get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 32, all over 2. I then get to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 28, when I do 4 minus 32, all over 2. This problem is a no solution. And the reason it's a no solution is because I can't find the square root of a negative. No negative number times itself no number times itself makes a negative. In order to multiply to a negative, you need one positive and you need one negative. You can't have both of them be the same sign. So as soon as you get a negative number inside the square root and there's nothing else to add or subtract or multiply, you can write no solution to a negative number inside. This is not your answer. It doesn't mean that we just leave this. Our answer is no solution. There is no way for this to work.